We are paid, that's all. We are God.
Yo guys! I'm Yuruzi. Here's part 7 of What If Naruto Studied Fuinjutsu. While exploring the Team 7 training ground, a young Naruto happens to stumble across a strangely shaped kunai embedded in a tree. Years of frustration and deciphering later, he finally cracks the Fuinjutsu formula hidden along the handle to surprising and painful results. At the same time, a ghost of the Otsutsuki sets in motion a plan to end his family's eternal conflict. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe and check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 27, The Laws of the Universe. Wosh. I am very pleased to meet each of you, and I look forward to a successful mission. Kakashi wanted to sigh as he stared at Guy's energetic clone. One unitard-clad shinobi was bad enough, but this is Rock Lee. He will be filling in for Naruto until we get back. Hinata was confused by his boisterous attitude, but still offered him a small bow. Sasuke just sent him strange look. He almost would have preferred dealing with Naruto's incoherent science babble, to this strange kid. Hello Lee-san. My name is Hinata Hyuga. I am very pleased to meet you Hinata-chan. Niji has told me much about you, but I am certain you will prove him wrong. And you must be Sasuke Uchiha, correct? And what if I am? He glared. I hope that once our mission is complete, you will agree to a spar with me. I have heard of your reputation, and I'd be very appreciative to test myself against you. Sasuke smirked. The guy had energy, he'd give him that. Sounds fun. Excellent. I look forward to the day we clash in youthful battle. Our flames shall blaze into the night as our hearts burn with the tremendous heat of battle. Let us complete our mission as quickly as possible so we may return for our fight. Are we ready to depart, Kakashi-sensei? Kakashi sighed at the future headache, but nodded. Alright, if we hurry, we should be able to mop up the camp and be back within 5 days. I want to be back in 4, so let's move out. They all nodded, and they shot off out of the gate. After several minutes of soaring through the trees, Sasuke speed up and fell alongside Hinata. He had noticed her reaction to this Niji guy's comment, and it didn't sit well with him. Something on your mind? He asked as he settled into her pace. It's nothing. Really, she murmured as they jumped from branch to branch. Isn't it usually your job to get me to open up? He teased. She chuckled at his comment. Yes, I suppose it is. Sasuke glanced back at Kakashi and Lee, who seemed to be caught up in their own conversation about something regarding a rivalry. I think we have some time before either of them will bother to listen in. So what was up about this Niji guy? My cousin and I are not exactly on the best of terms, she murmured. Why not? He asked as he kicked off from the next branch. He has been deeply hurt, and holds a stiff grudge against the main branch. He blames me and my father for something very awful that happened to his father. When did this happen? When I was about 5, she replied. It clicked as he remembered hearing about the Hyuga incident from his mother. She had been very worried the day afterwards, and held him more than she usually did. Apparently, she had been very close to someone in the clan. That doesn't seem very fair. You were too young to do anything at that point. Maybe, but he is right. It was my fault. If it weren't for me, his father would still be alive, she murmured as she dashed ahead of him. Sasuke did not have a smart rebuttal, so he let her stay ahead of him. Damn it, it was Naruto's department with talking sense into people, not his. He sighed as he realized he would have to talk to the blonde once he returned to the village regarding their teammate. The more things change, the more things stay the same, he murmured as they raced off through the woods. Naruto was uncharacteristically quiet as they walked through the village. Jiraiya could tell he was shooting him occasional glances, but apparently he just wouldn't speak up. Got something to say? Sorry, Naruto fumbled, I just don't know where to start. I've been looking forward to meeting a seal master so much, that I don't even know what I should ask first. Well, let's start with introductions. Go on and tell me about yourself. Naruto smiled as he stared back at the older man. Well, I'm sure Gigi has told you that I love studying Fuinjutsu, but I really love training with my team even more. Of course, they both have the same one-track mind, Jiraiya scoffed. Is it true that you trained the Yondaime? Naruto asked. Jiraiya puffed out his chest. Yes. Yes, I did. Naruto gazed up at him like a child in wonder. Wow! That makes you, like, my grand sensei. What was he like? Jiraiya chuckled as he rubbed the boy's hair. Honestly, a lot like you. He didn't come from some noble family or clan. He was just a kid off the streets, who had a lot of natural talent and the will to push that talent beyond its limits. Like you, he didn't know when to put the books down, and take the time to smell the roses. Naruto blushed as he rubbed his head. Jiraiya smiled and stared up at the stone face of his lost student. He was my pride and joy, but that's not to say my other students didn't disappoint either. Naruto sent him a confused look and Jiraiya laughed. Oh, this was going to be the death of him. Kushina always sent him and Minato that same exact look, whenever she was confused. What do you mean? A team has 3 members, numbskull, or did you think the Yondaime didn't need a team? Naruto was astonished that he had never even considered that the Yondaime had to have had teammates as well. He had never heard of them. What did they go off to do? Are they Fuinjutsu masters like you and the Yondaime? Not quite, he chuckled. They never really appreciated the art as much as you or I do, but that is not to say they didn't have their own accomplishments. All 3 of them did amazing work during the Third Shinobi War. Afterwards, one of them planned to take a break to raise a family before she would return to active duty, and the other one got slugged behind a desk and now has to deal with clan duties. What were they like? Naruto asked excitedly. Why don't you ask your teammates about their parents and find out? Jiraiya smirked as Naruto froze in the dirt. Wait! 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 Are you telling me the team's dad? Mother, Jiraiya corrected. Mother. And Hinata-chan's dad were both on Team 7 too. Wow, you really can accomplish something if you use that brain of yours, Jiraiya teased. Steam erupted from Naruto's ears, and Jiraiya merely laughed. I'm teasing Squirt, but yes, all 3 were my students, just like you guys are for Kakashi. Naruto was quiet as he digested this new information. This brought a whole new light to the team's dynamic. It not only made him feel a little closer to his teammates, but also to the hero he had never gotten to meet. He was part of a tradition now, and he had to admit it felt good. He shook his head and jogged up to catch up with Jiraiya's pace. So where are we going anyway? Up there, he replied as he pointed up towards the Hokage monument. What's up there? He asked as he strained his back looking up the Sandaime's nose. At the top? Nothing really, but there is a little place about half a mile away from the village behind the mountain. That is where we are heading. What's so special about it? You'll find out soon enough. Trust me, you are going to enjoy this place, kid. You may even learn a thing or two about yourself in the process. Naruto sent him a weird look, but shrugged and placed his hands behind his head as the mentor and future student headed off towards the incredibly long staircase up the monument. 30 minutes later. And here we are, Jiraiya announced as they finally arrived at the worn-down, wooden shack far out behind the Hokage monument. Could use a fix-up, Naruto muttered as he glanced at the faded wood. Maybe, but that's up to sensei to decide. The run-down appearance only helps deter people from looking inside. Now come on. Jiraiya swung the door open to the tiny shack, and Naruto felt chills as the air rushed past him. They made their way through the house, and Jiraiya bent down and snapped off a chunk of wood. He lit it with a light fire jutsu before handing it to Naruto. He thanked him as the older man lit his own torch, and led him further into the building. As they walked through the destroyed building, Naruto could not help but feel a feeling of familiarity with the place. They arrived at the back of the house to find an empty room. End of the line, Naruto muttered. Jiraiya ignored him as he walked across the room towards the wall and motioned him to join him. Give me your hand, he muttered as he took out a kunai. Why? Naruto muttered as he cautiously reached out his arm. He trusted Jiraiya enough to know he wouldn't ask him unless he had a good reason. I need a drop of your blood for this, he said as he positioned the kunai above the boy's open palm. Are you ready? Naruto was grateful for the heads up and closed his eyes. Ready, he hissed at the stinging as the kunai sliced into his hand. Jiraiya handed him a roll of bandages as he returned his attention back to the wall. He wiped his hand along the blade, smearing it in blood, and began writing intricate kanji along the wall. Naruto was fascinated as he slowly bandaged his hand. After a final stroke of his fingers, Jiraiya turned to him. Form the symbol for Rad and concentrate your chakra onto the symbol. Naruto was confused, but did as he was told. Instantly the blood staining the wall glowed green. The wall seemed to fade away as a set of stairs were revealed behind it. What was that? Naruto asked as he followed him down the stairs. Intricate blood seal. It's not enough for the blood of a relative to simply be used in designing the release seal. A family member actually has to be the one to release it as well. Naruto stopped dead in his tracks as they reached the bottom of the stairs. What do you mean by that? Exactly what I said, Jiraiya whispered as he dipped his torch into the two urns set near the doorway. They illuminated the room, revealing the wall covered in masks on the other side. Welcome to the Uzumaki clan temple, Jiraiya said as he stepped forward to inspect the masks. Naruto was overcome with emotion as he tried to process what the old man was saying. He was part of a clan. They had a temple. He glanced at the wall behind the masks and noted the swirl design painted overhead. He had seen that symbol every day on the uniforms of every Chunin and above within Konoha. What does that symbol mean? He muttered as he slowly stepped up next to Jiraiya. That's your clan's symbol, kid. But what does that mean? I have a clan. Jiraiya sighed as he motioned him to sit down across from him. He took their two torches and placed them within the urns at the entrance before sitting back down. Where to start? I'm sure you have multiple questions regarding the Uzumaki clan. Unfortunately, we don't have all day, and to be honest I don't know the full history of it, so I'll have to give you condensed version. Naruto waited with bated breath as he gave Jiraiya his undivided attention. Along with the Uchiha and Senju, the Uzumakis were just as influential with the development of the village. In fact, the first Hokage was married to one. They were world-renowned Fuinjutsu experts that originated from Whirlpool Country. They were blessed with ridiculous chakra reserves and had incredibly long lifespans. To their enemies, they were feared as much as they were respected. Naruto was silent as he digested this information. Why haven't I heard about them before? You can thank the Nidaime for that, Jiraiya said as he crossed his arms. Due to a number of factors, he decided that it would be better if the Uzumakis were removed from certain history lectures regarding the village. However, he didn't just want to toss them under the rug either. He was the one who made it a policy to have the Uzumaki symbol etched into the back of all Konoha uniforms. Through that, their legacy and influence in the village would live on forever. What could possibly be reason enough to justify that? Jiraiya simply pointed at the boy's stomach. For generations, the Uzumaki have provided perfect containers for the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Remember the Shodaime's wife? She was the first ever Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. Naruto was silent as he stared at the ground. What happened to them? Jiraiya sighed as he continued, they were wiped out. They were such a threat that multiple hidden villages teamed up to eradicate them before they could be used against them. Their knowledge and aptitude for Fuinjutsu was too much of an advantage for Konoha to have, especially in the times of using the tailed beasts for war. Naruto was silent as tears silently dripped down his face. He had always feared it, but now he was being slapped with the truth. He really was the last of his family. He jerked when he felt Jiraiya's hand on his shoulder. Now, it's not the end of the world. You're still here to carry on their legacy, and there were plenty of Uzumaki scattered across the world when they were attacked. I've actually met a few myself. One day, I'll try to track a few down and introduce you. He was surprised when the blonde raced across the ground and buried himself in the man's chest. He chuckled as he rubbed the younger boy's back as he shook against his chest. Now, I better not find any snot on my shirt when you get off. This stuff is expensive, you know. Naruto chuckled as he slowly released himself from the older gentleman. Sorry about that, he sniffed as he wiped his nose. Think nothing of it. Naruto startled, chuckling as he wiped away at his eyes. It's funny, he muttered, here I get my chance to really impress a seal master, and I go ahead and botch it by bawling my eyes out. Take it from a guy who's been through 2 wars, and a hell of a lot of suffering. There is no shame in letting loose a few tears. It's letting yourself get drowned in sadness that is really shameful. You get knocked down, you get back up and keep pushing ahead. That's been my policy. Looks like we share something in common, Naruto said as he flashed him a grin. More than you know, kid, he thought as he returned the grin. Naruto glanced up at the masks hanging from the wall and asked, so what's up with the creepy-ass masks? Jiraiya grinned and stood back up. They are part of why we are here today. Sensei has been keeping me in touch with your progress, and I got to say I'm impressed. Barely a teenager, and you're already on the advanced sets. Which book are you on, by the way? Book 5, Naruto responded proudly. I've been using shadow clones to help breeze through the material. Very clever, Jiraiya responded. In any case, I decided to help you out along your C rank quota by renting you out to help me with some errands and pass along a few Fuinjutsu tricks to you. Yada! Naruto screeched as his determination burned in his eyes. So what's first? That's the attitude I like to see. You've actually already started. That blood seal back there. I couldn't gain access to this place without you, which leads us back to your question of what we are doing about these masks. He returned his attention back to the different designs that cluttered the wall. Are you aware of the technique used to seal the kyubi inside of you? Naruto was surprised and placed his hand on his stomach. Not really. Jiraiya's face took on a grim look. Well, there is a reason it is considered forbidden. It is called the Reaper Death Seal, and no, I am never going to tell you how to do it. He cut him off before the blonde could ask the question. Honestly, I don't think anyone should ever use that jutsu, he muttered as he glanced from one mask to another. Why is that? Naruto asked as he too inspected the masks. The jutsu involves literally calling down the Shinigami to bind a contract. Naruto jumped away from him. What? Really? Yup. He creates the most powerful binding contract that can possibly be produced. In return for his assistance, he takes the souls of those he binds within the jutsu and the caster, and traps them within his stomach for all eternity. Naruto could only stare in astonishment. Who would even create a jutsu like that? Why don't you look around and venture a guess? Jiraiya remarked. The Uzumaki. Bingo kid. Like I said, they were light years ahead of what other nations could even dream of doing. You want to know the scary part? That was just one of jutsu they created. Who know how many others of equal strength they have hidden away? Where would that be? They had shrines and temples hidden all across the elemental nations, but their main base was in Whirlpool country. Once you're a little older and applying for your pilgrimage, we may swing by their old capital and see what we can find. I've always been curious what secrets they had locked up in there. The prospect excited Naruto and only motivated him to get through the advanced set even sooner. Anyways, we are getting off topic. The yondaime knew he was in a tough pinch, and decided the best way to guarantee sealing the kyubi inside you would be to use the Reaper Death Seal. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. But wait. That means... Yeah. The yondaime right now is trapped inside the Shinigami's stomach, where he'll stay for all eternity. Naruto was overwhelmed as it felt like he was losing his hero all over again. He just didn't deserve that kind of fate, especially after sacrificing himself for the village. Unless we set him free. Naruto stared at Jiraiya wide-eyed, who met his gaze. Ever since I found out which seal my idiotic student used on you, I've done everything I can to look into a way to set him free from that eternal pit of war and hell. My investigations have led me here to this shack and these masks. What are they? Naruto asked. Exactly what they seem, masks. However, if someone were to put on the correct one, they would be able to release the souls trapped within the Shinigami's stomach. And if they choose the wrong one? Naruto asked cautiously. They get a one-way ticket to the world of the damned, free of charge. So how do we know which is the real one? We don't. Only the current head of the Uzumaki clan at the time was ever allowed to know that information. Great. So we're doomed before we even begin. Not necessarily. I do believe I know an individual who knows which of these masks is the correct one, but he's not exactly the sharing type. The only way we are going to find out which is the correct mask is by going through the records of one of his bases. Well, why don't we? 'Cause he's a missing nin who has been responsible for the deaths of over 4,000 people personally and 17,000 internationally in the last 20 years. Plus, we have no idea where he is. Naruto could only gawk and sputter at the man. That's crazy. Surely you're kidding. Deathly serious. That is a gambit which is going to take some real finesse and a lot of work to get done, but, he smiled as he glanced down at his new student, it will be worth the wait, if it is successful. Naruto returned the smile. He had a new mission to add on to his already long list of promises for the future. Help Nei-chan with her problem, help Haku fight in Kiri, become the Hokage, obviously, and free the soul of his long-time hero. Alright, now let's get to work, Jiraiya said as he reached into his bag and pulled out several packets of paper. We are going to copy each and every design of the masks and note their location among the rest. The bottom left corner will act as the origin. We'll split them down the middle. Put that handwriting Fuinjutsu forced you to have to good use, and make sure draw those masks as detailed as possible. Naruto nodded, and the two of them got to work. The only sound in the room as the scratching of parchment and crackle of the flames lighting up the room. For 45 long minutes, the two of them cracked down until every mask was drawn, detailed, and sealed away inside Jiraiya's scroll. Alright. Now let's get some fresh air. I think I've had my fill of stuffy basement for the day, Jiraiya said as he headed towards the exit. Before he left, Naruto gave one last look around the secret room before he followed the man upstairs. They left the rotting cabin and began heading back towards the village. As they entered a small clearing, Jiraiya called for them to stop. Now then, this is as perfect a place as any. Let's talk Fuinjutsu. He motioned at Naruto and they both sat on the ground again. Jiraiya removed the scroll on his back and set it next to him. I want you to describe to me what you think Fuinjutsu is. Naruto straightened his back as he responded. Fuinjutsu is the art of sealing away objects, living beings, chakra, and a variety of other things within another object. Spoken right out of the textbook, Jiraiya smirked as he set a piece of paper in front of him along with a bottle of ink and a brush. But I have a feeling that definition doesn't sit well with you. Naruto nodded as he stared at the man. While technically, yes, Fuinjutsu does all those things, that is just the simplified version the writers place in textbooks so that it is easier for the students to comprehend. As I'm sure you noticed, they can do so much more than store away items. Kakashi has told me you are particularly fond of gravity seals. Naruto smiled as he continued, Fuinjutsu isn't just a written agreement to store objects away. I see it as more of a written contract with the universe at large. When the kanji are infused with chakra, they cease being just ink on a page and transcend into something more. No matter who you are, each kanji serves the same purpose and does the same thing. It is the order of kanji and how they are stacked on top of each other that allows Fuinjutsu to bend the normal laws of physics as we know them. He glanced up and shot Naruto a glance. Your gravity seals are a perfect examples of this. They allow you to control the scale of the gravitational force without any consequence without altering the amount of mass in the subject. Your Hiration is another perfect example, and yes, I do know about it, he responded as Naruto's mouth opened to ask the question. The moment you cracked the formula, Sensei sent me a letter. I'm really impressed you managed to get it to work. I could never get the thing down. So, have you gotten over your little problem using the jutsu yet? Naruto's eyes lit up as his memory in wave crashed back to him. In the spur of the moment to stop Gato, he had ignored the fact that he had used the Hiration without any negative consequences. He had been trying to bury the whole event within his mind, since his ruthlessness disturbed him quite a bit. He hadn't just been brutal to Gato, he had destroyed him, in the proper use of the word. There was nothing left of his head after he had released his jutsu. It disturbed him that he had the capacity to do that to another human being. He shook the thoughts as he jumped to his feet. Oh yeah. I managed to use it in wave without any side effects. I finally did it. Good. Let's see it. Naruto smirked and flipped out one of the tri-pronged kunai Jiraiya had seen 100 times before. He tossed and embedded it into the bark of a tree, before disappearing in a flash of light. Even though he was expecting it, Jiraiya couldn't help but be surprised by the familiar yellow flash. The kid had truly done it. Naruto flashed him a look of triumph, before it morphed to horror. He bent over as he began to throw up the contents of his breakfast and an alarming amount of blood. Naruto! Jiraiya called as he was instantly at the boy's side. Oh, that did not feel good, he muttered as Jiraiya eased him away from the pile of vomit and settled him down against another tree. I don't get it, Naruto muttered as he wiped his mouth with his sleeve. I did it before. Why can't I do it again? Jiraiya was silent as he studied the blonde. He had seen this exact same reaction from Minato, when he had first attempted the jutsu, but the symptoms had been much, much worse. For once, his peeping tendencies paid off, for Tsunade had been chasing him down all day for taking one glance into the bathhouses. How was he supposed to know Shizen would be in there that day? Thankfully, she ignored his impending beatdown and focused on healing Minato's injuries. He had several lacerations across his chest and navel region, and severe cases of internal bleeding. Minato never told him what the issues had been, but the next time he attempted the jutsu, it went off without a hitch. I have a couple ideas. For now, let's call it a day and meet back at Training Ground 7 tomorrow. No! Sensei, I can push past it. We were just getting to the good part. Don't end it now. He was just so eager to learn and prove himself, that Jiraiya couldn't help but chuckle. Relax, kid. You got me for the next few days, until Kakashi returns. I have some plans laid out for us, but we have plenty of free time to go over the intricacies of Fuinjutsu. Naruto wanted to argue, but hung his head in defeat. Cheer up. I think I might have a way to help fix your problem. Naruto shot up at that and gave him his undivided attention. It is going to require some major paperwork and persuasion, but I'm sure Sensei would let me take a gander at the Forbidden Scroll, especially for this. What's in there that could help us? The Nidame's original notes on the Jutsu. He was the one that designed the seal, but the Yondame was the one who perfected it. I think his original seal formula should help us. Naruto seemed embarrassed as he lifted the sleeve of his left arm and revealed a small storage seal on his left shoulder. He pressed his chakra into the marking and a medium-sized blue scroll materialized from the seal. He blushed heavily as he handed it to Jiraiya. Jiraiya seemed confused as he opened it and began reading over it. His eyes widened and he shot Naruto a glare when he realized what it was. Would you care to explain how you have this in your possession? Did Gigi happen to tell you how I managed to pass the Genin exam? You mean how you were foolishly tricked by that traitor of a teacher? Yes, he informed me. Naruto squirmed under his gaze as he shuffled his feet. I may have copied one or more things other than the Kage Bunshin as I was looking it over. Jiraiya sent him a scowl as he continued looking over the scroll. Sure enough, it was a perfect copy of all of the Nidame's notes on the Hiraishin, including his original seal formula. Does the Hokage now that you have this? Jiraiya asked, although he already knew the answer. No. I just saw the formula and it reminded me of the Hiraishin. I had limited time, so I just decided to copy it for later. I was going to tell him, eventually, after I completed the jutsu. He nearly whispered the last of his response. Jiraiya sighed as he rolled up the scroll. I don't think I need to say how dangerous it would be if this fell into the wrong hands. And you thought it would be best to keep it on your body? Better than keeping it under the floorboards in my room, Naruto murmured. Now that's fair enough. I should be reprimanding you for this, but what's done is done. You know why you shouldn't have done it, and we'll leave it at that. For now, I say we should use this to get ahead with the Hiraishin. Can we please start now? I'm already doing better, see? Indeed, the boy did seem to be back to his upbeat, energetic self. Whatever had been troubling Minato clearly wasn't affecting him the same way. Alright, fine, but if I say stop, we stop. Agreed? Agreed. Naruto chimed. Good. Now tell me what differences you've found between the two. Besides the shape, most of the formula is the same. There are bits and pieces that are different, but the only major difference is segments that deal with identifying the user. Have you ever tried performing the technique with the Nidame's version of the seal? Yuck, was all the response he needed. He sighed as he motioned towards the ink and paper he had set on the ground. Let's see what you can do, kid. I want you to copy down the Nidame's version onto the paper. Once it's done, I'll have you test it out and we'll go from there. You got it. I won't disappoint you, Naruto said with a salute as he got to work on the ground. Jiraiya chuckled as he stared back at the pile of vomit and blood that was already attracting flies. Oh, he had a few ideas for what were causing this all right. He just hoped they weren't as severe as he thought. Chapter 28, Solving the Hiraishin. Jiraiya closed his eyes as the familiar scent of the beech trees surrounding Konoha tickled his senses. The sound of dirt and gravel crunching beneath their feet was overshadowed by the excited chatting of the children around him. Two of his students marched ahead of him, casually chatting about the success of their latest mission, while his third pupil marched alongside him. The boy squinted in irritation as he fiddled with the bandages for a cut along his right arm. If you wouldn't mind, Sensei, I was hoping we could pick up the pace towards the village. Oh? What's the rush, Hayashi? Jiraiya lazily replied. I wish to return to the clan compound as quickly as possible. My Kaden still needs some work, and I want to ask Hizashi to spar with me, before he heads out with his own team. The young Hyuga heir scowled as he stared at his light injury. My rotation was too slow in the startup. That bandit's knife should have never gotten through my guard. Oh please, the dark-haired girl in front of him scoffed, you just want to get back so you can spy on Hitomi practicing in the gardens again. Any irritation held by the boy seemed to vanish instantly, as it was replaced by embarrassment. The normally reserved boy lost all composure as his face turned beet red, and he began nervously tapping his fingers together. I don't know what you're talking about, he muttered. The young heiress to the Uchiha clan smirked at the boy's heel turn in personality. Turning around, Mikoto marched up to him and poked him in the forehead. You can't fool me, lover boy. I bet you even follow her around outside your clan grounds. I think Sensei is starting to rub off a little too much on you. That's not true. He adamantly denied as he shook his head. However, his burning blush seemed to counter his claims. Their sensei and other teammate chuckled at Hayashi's embarrassment, as they watched Mikoto stride forward and wrap her arm around Hayashi's shoulder. Leaning in close to his ear, she whispered, "Hitomi-chan really is elegant when she trains, isn't she, Hayashi? It's almost like she's dancing as she weaves across the water. The way she bends her body, all while she's drenching wet. Her clothes just sticking to her figure." "Stop! Stop it!" The boy flustered as images raced through his mind, and he brushed her off, clamping his hands over his ears. Mikoto erupted in laughter at the Hyuga air. It was just too easy. All she had to do was mention her name, and the pale boy would become paralyzed with embarrassment. As the last few chuckles escaped her, her eyes softened a bit and she placed a hand on his shoulder. "Kidding aside, you really need to just man up and talk to her, Hayashi. Who knows? If you take too long, someone else may come along and snatch her up." I can't," he murmured as he twiddled his thumbs. Mikoto sadly smiled at his shy demeanor, before another toothy grin sneaked its way across her face. She gave him a light slap across the back. "That's okay, Hayashi-kun. I'll just do it for you." "What? No. Mikoto-chan, please don't." Their sensei and blonde teammate snickered as they watched the boy's frantic response. The Hyuga heir's head whipped in their direction with a look of hurt irritation. "And Minato? Stop laughing. Don't you dare tell her either." "I'm sorry, Hayashi, but I'm afraid I agree with Mikoto. You should just go up and talk to her. You never know what may happen," Minato calmly replied with a supportive smile. "You're just agreeing with her because she's best friends with Kushina." He rebuked as he pointed an accusing finger at him. Minato calmly shook his head. "Not true. I don't need to score brownie points with Mikoto-chan. I just happen to agree with her right now. You know, I'm more than willing to call her out if I don't agree with something she says or if she does something stupid." Mikoto sent him a short glare for his last comment, before flashing Hayashi a smug smirk, raising 2 fingers in a sign of victory. Minato's lip twitched upward with the hint of a mischievous smile. He just couldn't help himself. Like how she stalked Kushina's teammate, Fugaku, for 3 hours last Thursday. Mikoto stopped dead in her tracks and locked up. The lightest blush crept to her face, and Hayashi started to grin as the spotlight was shifted away from him. "Oh ho! I never thought I'd see the day," Jiraiya barked with laughter, before ruffling his student's hair. "Little Mikoto-chan finally interested in boys. I was beginning to worry you'd never shake that tomboyish attitude of yours. Now, why haven't we heard about this strapping, young lad before?" Mikoto ignored her teacher as she fixed Minato with a frigid glare. To his credit, Minato didn't flinch and stared calmly right back into her flaring Sharingan. Her red eyes were almost enchanting as the 2 tomos spun wildly around her pupil. "How do you know about that?" "Even Kushina doesn't know," she growled, as her fists began clenching and unclenching back and forth. "Really? I'm surprised. You two seem to share everything." Ignoring the air of malice directed solely at him, Minato smiled as he leaned in towards her face. "Well, it wouldn't be fair to leave her out of the loop now, would it?" Without waiting for her response, Minato turned on a dime and shot off down the dirt road. "Minato Namikaze! Don't you dare!" she roared as she raced after him. Jiraiya chuckled and Hayashi roared with laughter as they watched the Uchiha heir trying her hardest to keep up with her teammates' prodigal speed. "Brilliant, Minato! Simply brilliant!" Hayashi cheered as he watched the clouds of dust left in their path grow further and further away. "Sensei, remind me to thank him later. I finally have something to hold over her head." "No problem," Jiraiya smirked before placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, "but now that we're alone, I'm also very curious about this Hitomi-chan of yours. You haven't sneaked a peek with your Byakugan, have you?" Hayashi's blush returned full force as he suddenly found himself cornered once again. He nervously glanced in the direction of his teammates before shouting, Hey guys. Wait for me." Jiraiya chuckled as the cloud of dust raced away from him, and continued at his leisurely pace back towards the village. It was the small moments like this that made being a sensei again really worth it. The playful bickering. The youthful innocence. It was a much-needed respite from their normal line of work. He smiled and closed his eyes as he basked in the warmth of the summer sun. These were the moments he loved the most. All finished. An excited voice rang out, dispelling him from his daydream. Jiraiya shot one-eyed glance at the blonde boy sitting a few feet away from him. He glanced up at the sun and was slightly surprised. It had barely been half an hour. Jiraiya let out a yawn as he stood up and began to stretch. After cracking his neck, he walked over to inspect the boy's hard work. Naruto rubbed at the callus forming on his finger from gripping the brush too hard as he anxiously waited for the man's response. This was his big chance to impress an actual seal master, and he really wanted to make it count. Jiraiya was silent as he gazed over the design. He had to admit, the kid had talent. While he never fully understood the workings of the Hiraishin's design, he knew what should and shouldn't be present. The boy had used almost every square inch of parchment available on the scroll. It seemed more like the scrawling of a madman than an intricate cipher, but that was just the nature of the art. Naruto shifted his feet as he waited for the man's response. Would he be impressed? Finally, Jiraiya nodded and stared back at him. His heart rate picked up as Jiraiya smiled and said, "Not bad." "Not bad at all." Naruto perked up at the compliment and returned the smile. "Now, let's see what you can do with it." "Infuse the seal with chakra and minimize the design," Jiraiya ordered. He simply nodded and retook his place back in front of the scroll. He ran through 8 hand signs, before hovering his right palm above the wet ink. "Reseed," he whispered. The ink flashed once before the letters raced across the page, weaving in and out of other lines of code, until they settled into the familiar shape of the Nidame's Hiraishin seal. The bulk of the code rested within the circle of the design, and the rest, which regarded transmitting the signal to the user's mind, lay within the lines that arched out from the circle like spider legs. "Nice job. Everything seems to match up with the Nidame's notes, so I think you're good to go. Give it a shot whenever you're ready." Naruto nodded and picked up the scroll. He set out to the center of the field and placed it on the ground, before jogging back to Jiraiya's side. He closed his eyes as he let his chakra spread out into the surrounding area. His perspective of the world shifted, as everything turned grayscale. He noted the familiar yellow glow emanating from the 2 kunai sitting in his pouch. However, he was surprised as he reached out to the Nidame's design and was overcome by a completely different sensation. Unlike the bright feeling of the others, this one felt darker and released a blue glow. It wasn't hostile by any means, just foreign. It reminded him of a river cascading down the mountainside. Naruto hesitantly let his chakra reach out and take hold of the seal, and immediately something felt wrong. Something just wasn't clicking into place as it did with the other seals. He could feel his chakra lingering in the activation code, but something seemed to be fighting him. He had a little experience of this when he used the Yondame's seal, but never to this extent. However, he could still tell he could force the jutsu if he tried. Something in his gut was telling him not to do it, but it would be a waste to come this far and not at least make an attempt. He squashed down the feeling, and forced his chakra through anyway, activating the seal. As Jiraiya watched the boy disappear, he was a little surprised to note that, this time, there was no flash of light. His curiosity was short-lived and quickly morphed into horror, as Naruto reappeared over the new seal, immediately followed by an eruption of blood, splattering in every direction. Naruto's eyes were wide in shock and what blood was left in his body suddenly felt ice-cold. He barely even registered Jiraiya calling out his name, as he looked down at the gaping hole in his stomach. He felt the sting of something rising in his throat and he let out a wrenching, blood and mucus-filled cough before his knees buckled under him, falling flat onto his face. Jiraiya was kneeling next to the boy in an instant, completely ignoring the puddle of blood that was no doubt staining his pants. Jiraiya paled as he stared through the boy's abdomen at the blood-stained grass on the other side. This was even worse than when Minato had tried it. When recounting his first time attempting the jutsu, Minato had told him he had dealt with internal bleeding after the attempt, but those results were nowhere near this extreme. "Shit," he swore under his breath as he began racing through hand signs. "You didn't serve on the same team as the world's leading expert in medical ninjutsu without picking up a thing or two." Jiraiya was obviously nowhere near her level, but he would have to do for now. He couldn't move the boy to a hospital out of fear of dislodging what few organs remained in his body. On the other hand, the boy was likely to bleed out if he stayed here, and probably soon. No matter what he decided to do, his first priority was simply keep the boy's heart pumping. With his hands bathed in a soothing, green aura, he began reaching towards the boy's chest. Just as his fingers made contact with the skin, Jiraiya was taken aback as an ominous feeling washed over him. On the corner of what was left of Naruto's stomach, the tip of a dark marking began to glow, before orange, bubbling chakra began to erupt and spread across his body. Jiraiya cursed and quickly retracted his hands as the toxic chakra made contact with his skin. Despite the burning sensation on his hand, Jiraiya watched in fascination. The dark chakra poured into the gaping wound and began regenerating the boy's organs right in front of his eyes. The bottom of his lungs grew back first, followed shortly by his digestive system. He could literally see the tissue and veins reconnecting throughout the body, as muscles laced together, covering the new organs. A creaking sound filled the silence as Naruto's ribs painfully rematerialized over his lungs. Naruto thrashed for several minutes, before the skin was finally sewn back together. As he settled down, the familiar mark of the Kyuubi's seal glowed once more, before the orange chakra dissipated into the air. Naruto's eyes shot open. He took in one violent gasp of air, before he began coughing up blood all over his face. Jiraiya quickly flipped the boy over, ignoring his stinging hands, to prevent him from choking. The sage placed a gentle hand on the boy's back as the blonde began heaving all of the ground. Tears stung Naruto's eyes as his body tried to dispel whatever blood and tissue was lingering in his system. After 23 minutes, he finally stopped coughing, but continued to shiver as his hands tore into the dirt. Jiraiya reached into his bag, pulled out a small red ball, and held it in front of Naruto's mouth. "It's a blood pill. Chew this and swallow. I don't even want to know how much blood you just lost, and unless you want to go into shock, I'd recommend eating this." Naruto simply nodded without a word and weakly took the medicine from his hand. He softly chewed the bitter pill, before swallowing it with a shudder. He panted as he finally tried to gather the energy to form words. His throat burned as he forced out, "That really sucked." Jiraiya patiently let the boy take his time, as he helped him to his feet. The boy almost lost his footing on the puddle of blood that had accumulated around him, and latched onto Jiraiya's arm for support. Naruto made no attempt to complain when the older man eased the boy into his arms and began carrying him away. Jiraiya moved as carefully as he could over to the tree line, before leaning the boy against a trunk in the shade. "That was so much worse than any other time I've tried it," he panted as he weakly looked up at Jiraiya. Jiraiya made no response as his mind raced over what he had seen. No doubt about it. That had been the Kyuubi's chakra. Jiraiya had been out of the village during the Kyuubi attack and had never experienced it firsthand. After he had finally felt its presence in person, he could easily understand why some of the weaker-minded villagers would be terrified by the boy's presence. "Well? Are you just going to keep standing there, or tell me what the hell I did wrong?" the boy asked with a smirk. Jiraiya couldn't help but chuckle. The kid just didn't know when to stay down. He knelt to one knee and pointed at his stomach. "Kid, I don't think you fully comprehend how lucky you are that you're a Jinchuriki. If it weren't for the fox's chakra, I'm not sure I would have been able to keep you alive if I tried to cart you off to a hospital." "About damn time, he was useful for something," Naruto croaked. "I wouldn't quite say that. In fact, if I'm right, he's been helping you for a long time now." Naruto shot him a look with one eye. "The hell do you mean? You've been using the Hiraishin for how long now?" "For years. And with every attempt, you've been blowing chunks afterwards, correct?" Naruto nodded as he rubbed his stomach. "Yeah. What's your point? The fox has been saving your ass from death for years now. If I'm correct, and I'm almost certain I am, I know what the problem is, and how you're going to fix it. Stop building up the drama already. Tell me. Tell M dash." He cried out before he curled over and entered another coughing fit. "Easy," Jiraiya said as he placed his hand on his shoulder, "your body is still reeling from that whole fiasco. You literally just regenerated over a third of your internal organs. They are going to be softer than before, and need time to develop until they are back to normal. You need some time to recover, and let your lungs work out any lingering blood. I'll recover later. This, way more important." Jiraiya chuckled as he sat down next to him. "You've got fire, kid, I'll give you that. Alright, you want the explanation? Well, here it goes. Simply put, the seal backfired on you." Naruto was silent as guilt crept into his voice. But I copied it straight from the scroll. Did I make some mistake?" No. You copied it perfectly. However, the problem isn't with the design of the scroll, it's with you." The words felt like a slap to the face. After all this time and efforts, he was still doing something wrong. He had always presumed as much, but hearing it from someone else made it feel worse. What do you mean? Let's start from the beginning. Remember when I told you how something similar happened to the Yondaime after he first attempted the Jutsu? Yeah. Well, afterwards, he went back and pored over the formula for months. The next time he showed it to me, I was surprised he had changed it into a different shape. For years, I've always figured he had made some mistake in copying the original formula and later modified it to suit his needs, but now I see he completely rewrote it altogether. Hand me one of your kunai. Naruto shifted his position against the tree, and grunted as he reached into his pouch. He pulled out one of the tri-pronged kunai and handed it to Jiraiya. Let's talk about how the jutsu works. When compared to the replacement jutsu, the Hiraishin is considered superior since it requires nothing in exchange and happens instantaneously. From what I can gather, it works by linking directly to the user's chakra, and transporting everything in contact with it to the designated marker. For it to keep hold of the person, it needs to anchor down on a certain point of the user's body. He paused as he pointed at Naruto's stomach. For most people, their largest center of chakra happens to reside in their stomach and navel regions. This goes especially for you, considering what you have sealed there. I thought chakra was created in the heart. That's right, but that doesn't mean it's stored there. That would create a nasty buildup of pressure that would eventually cause the heart to pop. Instead, the body stores chakra similarly to how it stores fat. It is spread in cavities all over the body, and the largest of these is located around the stomach. Jiraiya paused as he pointed at the seal on the kunai. The jutsu works by linking the user and the seal through the largest concentration of chakra. As tired as Naruto was, he fought to stay alert. He had waited 4 years for this explanation, and he was not going to miss it due to a little exhaustion. Okay, but what does that have to do with the whole getting there? Now, when the jutsu is activated, a tether is created between the largest concentration of chakra in the body and the seal. This anchor serves as the starting point of the jutsu, and connects to the body's chakra system before it activates. My guess is that when you force the jutsu to activate, there is an error causing the anchor to momentarily disconnect, which causes the area of your body that was connected to disappear into whatever void you cross when you use the technique. So, in summary, every time you have used the technique, a hole has been torn inside you. Thankfully, your Uzumaki lineage and the Kyuubi rapidly worked to heal any damage left behind. Jiraiya paused as he inspected the kunai in his hand. Now, the reason this keeps happening is because the seal just wasn't designed with someone like you in mind. Naruto felt his heart break as his mind instantly made a connection. Of course it was because of the Kyuubi. It just had to go out of its way to torment his life. It was just his luck that he wouldn't be able to achieve his goal, just because of the stupid fox's presence. So it really is the fox's fault, he murmured. I didn't say that. It actually has nothing to do with the fox. Naruto snapped his head up. I thought you just said it wasn't designed with a Jinchuriki in mind. Those weren't my words. I said it wasn't designed with you in mind. Simply put, I believe each Hiraishin symbol is coded to work with only their creator's chakra specifically. Realization flooded through Naruto as everything started to fall into place. So you're saying it's just not built to work for anyone else? That's right. The reason why you and the Yondaime reacted so horribly to using the original design was because the Nidaime had coded it to his own specific chakra signature. We both know how specific seals have to be to work perfectly. If anything is different other than as intended, it can lead to some nasty side effects. The Yondaime must have figured this out, and created his own version of the technique that would work with his own chakra network. As Naruto tossed this information around, a new thought struck Jiraiya, causing him to chuckle before bursting out laughing. Oh, Minato! You massive dork! Naruto only deadpanned at the man's sudden burst of hysterics. What's so funny? Jiraiya's smile stretched across his face, as he leaned in and said, I hate to shatter the illusion for you kid, but the truth is, the Yondaime was a giant nerd. No! Naruto gasped. Oh, big time. He was even more of a bookworm than you are, and he spread his interests far outside of just Fuinjutsu. He got worse as he grew older. It was rare that you would ever find him without his face buried in a book. He was also a massive lover of fantasy. Speaking of which, he also had a flash for the theatrics, no pun intended. I just realized that the Nidaime's version of the jutsu didn't include the yellow flash of light, which means Minato must have added it in when he created the jutsu to try and look cooler. Jiraiya laughed again as Naruto covered his ears. Stop it. You're ruining my childhood. You think that's bad? You should have heard some of the names he came up with for techniques. I think my personal favorite was the spiraling flash super round dance hall style 3. Why you're making that up? Wanna bet? That was just one of the shorter ones. I have pages of these things written down somewhere. Naruto was mortified as shining image of his hero in his mind was now replaced with a blonde man with giant glasses waving at him behind a book. Oh. Damn you, Jiraiya-sensei. Why did you have to ruin that for me? After settling down, he returned his thoughts to the sudden burst of information. Finally, he knew what the problem was. He wasn't performing the jutsu incorrectly. It was that the seal just wasn't designed for his chakra. Wait. If they both aren't made to work with my chakra signature, how come the Nidames caused a more violent reaction than the Yandames? Who knows? It could be anything from the Yandames version just being more compatible by nature or that you have a similar chakra signature to him. Naruto seemed to accept this answer, and Jiraiya let out an inner sigh of relief. Honestly, it was very close to the second option. Even though they were father and son, their chakra signatures were not quite the same. They were certainly close, but apparently not enough to satisfy the seal's layout. If it weren't for their familial connection, the seal would have reacted just as badly as the Nidames had. While the malfunction was much less severe with Minato's design, Naruto would never be able to utilize the technique to its true potential while using his father's seal. As if reading his mind, Naruto muttered, "So basically, I have to create my own version of the Hiraishin if I want to use it as effectively as he did." Bingo! Naruto let out a smile and started to get back up. Whoa. What do you think you're doing? What do you think? Let's get started now. He exclaimed, right as he lost his balance and leaned against the trunk. Kid, that is not just something you finish overnight. Hell, you'd be lucky to get it done within 5 months at the minimum. This isn't just as simple as restructuring a seal to fit your needs. You'd be building it from the ground up, and that involves planning out a new shape and structures, which kanji to keep and change, and even which stroke size to get it correct. Naruto shot him a weak smile as he tried to push himself off the ground. Then let's stop wasting time. Jiraiya snorted as he reached his fingers out and tapped the boy in the forehead. Naruto's eyes drooped and sleep finally enveloped him as fell backwards. Jiraiya gently caught him and slung him over his shoulders. I think that is enough action for one day, he chuckled as he hoisted himself up. It had certainly been productive. Sure, the boy had nearly died, certainly wasn't going to mention that to Sensei, but he would bounce back better from the experience. For years now, he could never solve what the problem was. Now that he was aware, Jiraiya was sure he would pour his heart and soul into the project until it was complete. He then began the hike back towards the village. The sun was setting by the time he reached the Hokage monument. As he stood on top of the stone heads, he took a minute to admire the village bathed in the orange light of the setting sun. He felt the younger boy snuggle into his back and shot him a smile. He certainly wouldn't be thanking him if he knew where he was taking him. If he was anything like his mother, he despised hospitals. With a soft chuckle, he began the long trek down the stone staircase to the village. He would need his rest, for they were far from done. Jiraiya had rented him out for only a few more days, before he had to hand him back to Kakashi. It would be a couple more weeks after that before he could spend time with his godson again. As fun as this time was, he had his own missions to do. Sensei had all but ordered him to return early, and he would eventually need him to crack down and get to work. Chapter 29, Promise. I got it. The young boy cried as he raced towards the door. Tai! Wait for me to see who it is, a voice called from the kitchen. Ignoring his sister's warnings, he tore open the door and smiled at the masked man before him. Whoa! Hello again, Anbu-san. He greeted with a smile. Kitsune nodded at the young boy's enthusiastic greeting and glanced behind him. Is your sister here by chance? Right here, a voice called from down the hallway. Ria came around the corner wiping her hands on her apron as she approached the door to her apartment. Can I help you, Kitsune-san? She asked as she placed a protective hand on her brother's shoulder. I just came by to update you on our last discussion, he said while glancing at the young boy. Ria's eyes widened, as she understood. Tai, why don't you go watch some TV in our room? I'll call you once dinner is ready. But why? I want to talk with the shinobi guy. He pouted as he crossed his arms. Trust me, you'll only find it boring, she said as she ruffled his hair. We're just talking about where you'll be starting school next year. You mean it? Does that mean I get to go to the academy? Her eyes flashed, but she held her tongue and said, maybe. We'll talk about it later. Ignorant of his sister's reaction, he waved at Kitsune before heading back down the hallway and entering the room he shared with his sister. You know, it wouldn't be a bad idea to consider it, Kitsune said before she shot him a glare. Over my dead body. He is never going anywhere near that school. I will not allow my brother to become a shinobi, she angrily whispered. He seems quite passionate about it. He's 6. He's passionate about everything. Besides, he's too young to really understand what being a shinobi means. I started even younger than that, he replied, but that's not why I'm here. Is there anywhere we can continue this conversation in private? She angrily nodded and motioned him to follow her into the kitchen. She offered him a seat at the small table, as she placed the finishing touches to their dinner. Kitsune had been here once before, and it was still just as run down as it had been before. It was a small, cheap apartment with only 4 rooms, a tiny living room conjoined with the kitchen, a single bathroom, and a bedroom, which the siblings were forced to share. It wasn't the nicest apartment, but they certainly could do with far worse. After placing a lid on the boiling pot, she washed her hands and sat down at the table. Now what did you find out? I traced along the path you described and came across the wreckage of the caravan. Just as you feared, you and your family were seemingly targeted by a group of shinobi. She clenched her fists as she stared at her lap. Who was it? Unknown at the moment, but it appears as if your convoy was from IWA, he replied. Do you have any idea why they would target you? She was quiet as she rubbed her head. No, my family were simple traders. I really don't remember much of my early childhood. There's the occasional flash of mom and dad, but most of it is just blank. Kitsune was quietly processed this. She still adamantly seemed to believe her family had been traders. Perhaps her mother had taken up the craft while she was off duty with the children. Did you find anything regarding my older brother? Kitsune simply stared back at her, unresponsive. The Hokage had been explicit. Until they held all of the information, the children were to be kept on a need-to-know basis. No. From what I could tell, you two were split up during the final assault. Do you remember how you were separated? She shook her head. Not really. Whenever I think back to it, all I can remember is a flash of red and then everything goes dark. Kitsune became rigid at this comment. This confirmed his suspicions. It had been an Uchiha. After that, everything just goes fuzzy. The next thing I remember is being found by some leaf shinobi and being escorted to the village. He was silent as he digested this information. Just as he had feared, she seemed to be repressing most of the incident and her early life to consolidate the harsh reality of what she had seen. No one saw their mother being impaled and walked away from it unscathed. Ria, I know this may be hard to hear, but I believe it would be best if you were to seek psychological aid. Come again. Kitsune ignored her blunt comment and continued, as I was using my probe to look through your memories, I discovered the indicators that you are suffering from severe trauma. While you might not like to hear it, I believe you are repressing painful memories to save yourself from facing the reality of what happened. She was quiet as he reached his hand across the table and grabbed her fist. I saw what happened. That was a lot to take in for a child. She clenched her teeth as she stared back at his mask, but did not pull away from him. I am not some helpless little girl. No, you most certainly are not. I have been very impressed how hard you have been working to support yourself and your brother, but you were still just a child. Your mind was much more fragile than it is now. Well, how do you expect me to pay for psychiatric sessions? I won't waste my money on something as trivial as that, nor would I expect you to. Since it is part of an investigation, the village would be happy to cover the costs. I have an old connection with a Yamanaka named Inoichi. He is in charge of the information division of the village, and has several doctorates in psychology. I'm sure he would be happy to take some time out of his day to talk to you. I know it may seem like a sign of weakness seeing a psychologist, but the first step of tackling a problem is admitting there is one. She was silent as her grip in his hand tightened. If you want to regain your memories and help us catch whoever was responsible, I truly think meeting with someone may be the best solution. I'll think about it. Good. That's all we can ask of you, he said as he released her hand. By the way, he said as he reached for his forearm, I stumbled across something I think you will be happy to see again. A tiny cloud of smoke erupted from his arm, and in his hand was a brown teddy bear. Her eyes widened in recognition and a blush formed across her face, as he handed it to her. Where in the world did you find this? This can't be the same bear I had as a kid, she said in awe as she inspected the knitting and patchwork of the previously decrepit old toy. I found it sitting in the mud out in rain country, he replied as he stood from the table. I had to wash it a few dozen times, restuff it, and sew it back together, but make no mistake, that is yours. She hid her excitement as she stuffed the small bear behind her back. Thank you, she muttered as she glared at the ground. Don't mention it. He knew from personal experience that even the tiniest strings to one's past could make a world of difference. Now, unless there is anything else, I have another appointment. She shook her head and offered to lead him to the door. As he left her apartment, he turned and said, "A pleasure as always, Ria-san. If you or your brother have any questions or concerns, simply ask the shinobi office for me, and I will be happy to assist you." He gave her one last nod before he started dashing off towards the TNI department. He had a meeting to get to. Ria watched the blonde ANBU race across the village, and slowly shut the door behind him. She brought out the stuffed bear from behind her back, and quietly stared back at the cracked glass eyes. She softly smiled as she rubbed her thumb across the worn material. Nobody moved in the dark cell hidden beneath the village. The air was stale and dry, just like the stone walls that enclosed the room. 3 men stood silently in the darkness as they stared at the sleeping form of the man bound in chains. "We had to trank him shortly before you arrived. He overheard one of the guards mention you were coming, and started thrashing wildly. He would have bit off his own tongue if he kept flailing like that," Ibiki commented, breaking the silence. "Not a very pleasant fellow, is he?" Jiraiya mused as he knelt before the man. "That's an understatement," Kitsune scoffed. "I've lost count of how many obscenities he shouts at me on a daily basis." Jiraiya chuckled as he opened the prisoner's mouth and shined a flashlight down his throat. Sure enough, there was the seal right above his uvula. How fast does the seal react to a Yamanaka's presence? We haven't really done tests, but the moment a Yamanaka's jutsu attempts to enter his mind, the seal overrides the suppression tags on his chakra and forcefully activates his Kekai Genkai. It doesn't matter if he's awake or asleep. They remained silent as Jiraiya continued to inspect the Zaofu's seal. Jiraiya whistled at the sight of the chain-like patterns that wrapped around the triangular image. Iwa's seal core have been getting better," Jiraiya chuckled. "How long do you think it will take for you to break?" Ibiki chimed in. "Honestly, it depends," he responded as he reached into his bag. "If I were to sit down and completely focus on nothing but this, I could probably have this cracked within a week or 2. However, I don't have that kind of time." He carefully eased a piece of paper into the man's mouth and pressed it against the triangular seal. After a quick flash, he retracted his hand and stared down at the new image on the previously blank paper. "I'll work on it in my free time. I'd give it to our blossoming new seal master to look over, but I think this is a little outside of his reach right now. Besides, he has his hands full as it is." With their work done, the 3 men exited the dark cell, and made their way down the halls of the ANBU interrogation division. "How was your conversation with the girl?" Jiraiya asked. "As expected," Kitsune replied. "I recommended she speak with Inoichi, and she at least agreed to think it over." "She still has no recollection of her past?" Ibiki asked. "None. From our first conversation, she revealed she actually believes her family was simple traders. She has no idea where she came from or of her lineage." "Good," Jiraiya mused. "Unless she remembers it herself, I'd like to keep it that way." The last thing they needed was the girl thinking it would be better to run from the village and make a break for IWA. "Any luck on our mystery assailants?" Kitsune shook his head. "Being limited to the village has impeded my progress. Once the Chunin exams are over, I presume I'll have much more luck identifying our targets. I intend to reach out to a contact in Kyumo to see if he has any more information on the ANBU assassins." Ibiki nodded. "And what of the masked individual?" "The Hokage has been silent on that matter," Kitsune growled. "He and Danzo know something, yet they have declined to share their information with me. I'm sure they have their reasons, but it doesn't sit well with me either," Jiraiya said with a frown. "Until they are willing to share, we are just going to have to solve this on our own. I've sent a message out to my contacts asking about the men. I'll let you 2 know if anything comes up." The 3 of them nodded as they went their separate ways. Jiraiya was silent as he exited the ANBU headquarters and made his way across the village. He ignored the bustling traffic and shouts of vendors as he headed towards the hospital. "What are you hiding, old man?" A few hours later, Jiraiya was patiently sitting in training ground 7 waiting for the blonde menace to arrive. He had been discharged from the hospital earlier that morning. Despite his injuries from the previous day, he was already bouncing around and back to perfect health. The Kyubi truly was a wonder. Jiraiya couldn't say he had been surprised when he had entered Naruto's hospital room. Paper covered in seals were strewn everywhere, across the IVs, the chairs, and even the windows. Naruto sat in his bed with his brush in his teeth, muttering under his breath. In his right hand, he twirled one of the Yondame's kunai, and the other was placed under his chin as he stared down at his latest batch of notes. I don't think you get the idea of taking it easy, do you? Jiraiya asked as he made his way towards the bed. Naruto simply nodded in his direction, never taking his eyes off of the paper in front of him. He continued to mutter as he made tiny notes here and there across the paper. What part of later did you not understand? Jiraiya asked as he swiped the paper from his hands. Jiraiya-sensei. Give that back. He cried as he flailed for the paper that was just out of reach. Jiraiya simply held one finger to the boy's head as he glanced at the boy's notes. As expected, the boy was already starting to design the new layout for the Hiration. I need to get back to work. The sooner I redesign the seal, the sooner I can finally use the Hiration perfectly. Work, work, work. Is that all you do, kid? Jiraiya had chuckled as he handed back the notes. The blonde had ranted on and on about his dream or something, to the point where Jiraiya simply zoned out. Yada, yada, Hokage, yada, yada, Seal Master. He just didn't know when to stop. He had told him to collect his stuff and meet him at the training ground in a few hours, and they would get back to work. Speaking of which, just a minute before the set time, the blonde came bursting through the trees and stumbled into the clearing. I am not late, am I? He sputtered as he clambered onto his hands and knees. No. Geez, kid, relax a little. Jiraiya chuckled. Naruto let out a sigh of relief as he brushed himself off and made his way over to the Toad Sage. Sorry, but you don't understand what Kakashi-sensei does to us if we're late. He shuddered as their one terrifying experience came flashing back to him. He hadn't been able to walk properly for 5 days. Jiraiya chuckled as he remembered the stories how harsh Kakashi used to be when he was in charge of ANBU. I guess these kids finally gave him the wake-up call he needed. Well, now that you're here, we can get back to business, he said as he took out a fresh piece of paper and placed it in front of them. So, where are we starting with the Hiration seal? Naruto asked as he bounced around. We aren't, he replied, causing Naruto to deflate. I told you. That is going to have to be something you figure out by yourself. It is going to be a seal that revolves entirely around you and how you work. If I'm involved in the process, my style may bleed into yours. I'm happy to voice my opinion here or there, but I'm not going to hold your hand. Some things in life need to be faced alone. Naruto was quiet as he digested these new comments. He may have agreed with the old coot, but he wished he hadn't been so blunt about it. Now, in the meantime, let's move on to something a bit more practical that will pay off sooner than working on the Hiration design. Naruto was shook out of his thoughts and watched as Jiraiya placed his hand above the piece of paper. He closed his eyes and placed his palm on the paper, and an instant later, the signature symbols for a simple storage seal sprung across the page. Naruto was confused as Jiraiya raised his hand and smirked at him. I don't get it. Was the seal just hidden in the page or something? Not at all. What you just witnessed is called marking. Tell me, what is the biggest hindrance for Fuinjutsu users in combat? Having to alter or write up new seal tags to accommodate for the situation, or running out of pre-made tags? Naruto replied while crossing his arms. Correct. This is the main reason why most people ignore Fuinjutsu as a combat form. It is tedious to learn and can be difficult to accommodate on the battlefield. Now this was a problem for several generations, until a Fuinjutsu user stumbled upon a neat trick, which he learned from a young lord in Wind Country. The young lord had been given the full education of someone of his stature, which included a basic understanding of chakra. As he drenched through mountains of paperwork, he sought a way of cutting down time. Jiraiya smirked as he raised his palm. So he sought out a jutsu that could help him, and ended up creating his own. Jiraiya lowered his hand and created another storage seal next to the original one. He ended up finding a way of converting his chakra into ink. He then pushed this jutsu to the next level and found a way to shape the ink into whatever form he desired. Pleased with his discovery, he simply used the technique to cut down time by signing his name across his paperwork. Lucky for us, and the world, our Fuinjutsu wanderer saw another application for the technique. Naruto's eyes flashed, as he understood. You could convert the ink into the shape for seals. Right on the noggin. Although it wasn't his intention, the Lord accidentally invented the perfect jutsu for seal masters to apply seals on the battlefield. All they would need is a single touch, and they could apply seals wherever they want. They were no longer dependent on what they prepared ahead of time for a fight. Naruto bristled with excitement as all of the new possibilities raced through his mind. Now, there are some problems with the technique, Jiraiya said, catching his attention. The shape of the applied seal is only as good as the user's mental image of what he intends to create. Jiraiya pictured the seal he had seen earlier this morning as he placed his hand upon the page. The result was similar to the actual seal, but not quite perfect. There were bumps along the ink, and the triangle slightly bent to the left. As you can see, the technique is limited by the concentration and memory of the user. I would recommend only using this for seals that you truly have memorized by heart. We know how temperamental seals are if they aren't exactly right. The slightest mistake in the design, and it may end up backfiring on you. Naruto was quiet as he ran through which seals he truly had memorized. For right now, I'd stick with those gravity seals that you are so fond of. From what I've heard, you seem to use those enough that you should have a pretty good mental image of them by now. So what's the first step? Naruto asked as he straightened his back. Jiraiya smirked. The jutsu has only 2 hand signs, but once you use it enough, you won't even need them. It will become second nature to you. The first step involves converting your chakra to ink, and the second step is shaping the ink how you want it. Naruto nodded as copied his hand signs and got down to work. They barely even noticed how the time seemed to pass, as they solely focused on perfecting the technique. Jiraiya would be off in the shade glancing over the design from IWA, and occasionally glance at the boy as he splattered the page with ink again and again. Before they knew it, 3 days had passed. Jiraiya groggily headed out towards the field, chowing down on an apple. He was surprised to see the blonde already hard at work, surrounded by piles of paper. As he watched from the shade, he couldn't help but chuckle. Just look at him go. Minato had done exactly the same thing at his age. Though, to be fair, he also had Kushina joining him from time to time. When those two had put their heads together, there was almost no problem they couldn't solve. You two would have been so proud, he thought as the boy raised his arms and shouted in victory. He chuckled at the boy's little dance as he headed across the field. Getting anywhere? He called out. Naruto turned around and shot him a big grin. He picked up his latest attempt and shot across the field towards him. I did it! Look at it! The design is perfect! He exclaimed as he handed the slip of paper to Jiraiya. Sure enough, the gravity seal looked no different than if he had drawn it with a brush. Alright, now let's see if it works, he commented as he took one last bite of his apple. He placed the tag on the fruit and set it on the ground. Naruto formed a hand sign, and the tag flashed white. He went down to pick up the apple, and smiled when he could barely lift it off the ground. Well done, and in only a few days too, he mused as he fondly slapped him on the back. Alright. Now what's next? Naruto asked excitedly. Geez kid. Stop and smell the roses, Jiraiya chuckled. To be honest, that's about all I had planned for our few days together. Kakashi should be back later today or tomorrow, and then you'll be back with your team. Naruto deflated as he realized his time with the Seal Master was drawing to a close. He had been having too much fun talking with someone who could actually keep up with him, that he hadn't even noticed that their time had flown by. Isn't there anything else we can do? He asked as he shuffled his feet. Jiraiya softened his gaze and ruffled the boy's hair. The boy really needed to learn how to conceal his emotions. He was like an open book. He would have loved to spend more time with his godson, but they both had their own jobs to get back to. Don't look so glum, kid. It doesn't suit you. I have one last thing planned for us before we're done. The old man wants me to check over the seals placed along the wall of the village, while I'm in town. An extra set of eyes will be appreciated. Now gather your stuff. We'll head out in a few minutes. Naruto nodded as he started collecting his things. After a few minutes, the two were heading back towards the village. Naruto was quiet as he stared down at the ground, trying to find the right words to say. Don't worry kid, this ain't the last you'll be seeing of me, Jiraiya said, breaking his train of thought. You'll see me again sooner than you'd think, and we'll have more time than just a few days. Really? Yep, just focus on making it through the Chunin exams in one piece. We'll have plenty of time afterwards to truly dig into some Fuinjutsu lessons. Promise? Naruto asked as he glanced up at the man. Jiraiya smiled as he stared back at him. Promise. Chapter 30, the exam begins. Sasuke was silent as they approached the village. Lee was having a rather loud conversation with Hinata, while Kakashi was trying to drown out the noise with his book. Their mission had been an absolute success, but his personal one had not. He glanced back to Hinata, who, in his opinion, was being impressively patient with the hot-headed boy and cheerfully chatted back. He had tried to bring up the issue regarding her cousin more than once over the course of their trip, but she would shut him down every time. Eventually, he decided to drop the issue in fear of pushing her too far. He resigned to letting the blonde deal with it once they got back. Talking to people wasn't exactly his forte anyway. However, it did sting a bit more than he would like to admit, that she seemed to open up to Naruto rather than him. Soon, the familiar, looming walls came into view. The white siege walls of the city stretched all around the village borders as far as the eye could see. As the group grew closer, they each noticed two small dots sitting about halfway up the stone structure. The closer they got, the more defined the dots became, until Sasuke sighed and recognized the frame of his teammate and the old man he had been saddled with. Even before they reached the wooden gates, they could hear the voices of the two shouting back and forth at each other. No! 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 The chakra detection seal goes over the hexagonal integrity seal. I got it. Fine, you're right. It made sense the first time you explained it. Then stop placing them under the integrity seals. It's not like I'm trying to on purpose. They look too similar to the, ugh, which were these again? I already told you. It's the reverse climbing seal. It prevents enemy shinobi from using their chakra to walk up the wall. That's a terrible name. Why not call it the anti-sticking seal or anti-invader seal? 1. Those are too vague. 2. I didn't come up with the names. And 3. Stop complaining and just focus on getting them in the right order. Maybe I could if you'd stop yelling at me for a minute. Maybe I would if you didn't keep messing up. Sparks flew between their eyes as they drew face to face. Neither wanted to back down as the two growled at the other's stubbornness. I hope it hasn't been like this the entire time we've been gone, Kakashi called up from gate. Naruto looked down and completely forgot about his feud with the old sage due to the welcome sight before him. A smile split apart his face as he raced down the side of the wall. You're back! He exclaimed as he slammed into the ground. How did it go? Did you get to fight a lot of bad guys? Very good to see you as well, Naruto, Kakashi chuckled. The mission was a total success. I'm sure Sasuke and Hinata would be thrilled to catch you up. Not much happened, Sasuke said with a shrug as Naruto faced him. We didn't really need any ninjutsu. There were only about 30 of them, and we made quick work of them. Naruto nodded before glancing at the boy in green spandex behind him. Oh, hey! And you are? Naruto, this is. My name is Rock Lee. I am very pleased to meet you, Lee cut in as he raced forward and started vigorously shaking his hand. Your youthful teammates have told me much about you, Naruto-kun. I hope we can blossom into beautiful friends. Naruto could barely keep up with the green-clad boy, who talked a mile a minute. He was seriously worried about the boy ripping his arm off. It's nice to meet you too, Lee. I'm sure we'll be good friends. Yosh! He exclaimed while striking his victory pose. He flashed him a blinding smile as Kakashi coughed to catch their attention. Lee, I appreciate you lending a hand, and I'm sure Hinata and Sasuke feel the same. I know you're dying to get back to your training, so you're free to head out and meet up with Guy if you wish. Lee's eyes sparkled as he hugged the man around the waist. Kakashi squirmed as Lee shouted, "Thank you, Kakashi-sensei. Truly, you are as insightful and considerate as Guy-sensei claims you to be." Lee released him and gave a salute, before turning back to the snickering team. It was nice meeting you all. I hope we will clash in youthful combat during the Chunin exams. I wish you all the best of luck. With that, he tore off into the village heading straight off towards the training grounds. Guy-sensei would really lay into him if he had slacked off in any way during his trip. He was already behind on his weekly 1,000 laps around the village. Naruto simply stared at the retreating dust cloud. That had been interesting. Sasuke leaned in and asked, "Remind you of anyone? What do you mean?" "You know. Very loud, super passionate, loves a hideous color." "Ring any bells?" "Hardy har," he dryly replied. Was he really like that the entire time? You have no idea, Kakashi sighed, his sensei's even worse. Naruto shivered at the thought, before Lee's final words clicked in his head. Wait. Did he say he was entering the Chunin exams too? Yeah, he did, and I really hope we get to challenge him and his team, Sasuke said with a smile. That guy? Despite how ridiculous he looks and acts, he's strong, Sasuke replied while shaking his head. Very strong. And fast. Maybe even faster than you. Now that lit a fire under his stomach. Naruto grinned at the prospect, and really hoped they indeed met again during the exams. Sasuke was glad he had mentioned Lee's team. It reminded him that he had something he wanted to discuss with the blonde. "Hey Dobe," he started to whisper, but he was cut off as a light bulb went off in Naruto's head. He raced past Sasuke up to Kakashi and Hinata, and exclaimed, "Sensei! You won't believe it. I finally figured out what's wrong with the Hiraishin." Everyone was silent as the gravity of what he had said sunk in. "Really?" Hinata asked in awe. "Naruto-kun, that's wonderful. Well, that certainly is good news. Glad to hear your time with Jiraiya turned out to be fruitful." Sasuke shoved Neji out of his mind as he intently listened to the blonde regale his tale of how he figured out the issue. He could bring up Hinata's cousin at another time. As the blonde rambled on, Jiraiya smirked at him from up on the wall. "One-track mind all right," he muttered as Naruto spread out his hands to illustrate the blood splattering everywhere. Nostalgia flooded through him as he began to see the ghosts of his past lay over the current Team 7. Honestly, the old man was just toying with him when he set up this team. He laid his gaze on Kakashi, and they shared a short glance. He had done a good job with these kids. They were almost out of his hands now, but he should have nothing to regret. They were turning out just fine. Jiraiya placed the finishing touches on the wall's seals, and gave Kakashi one last nod before disappearing in a swirl of leaves. Kakashi had received his message loud and clear. Naruto was his again. At least for a little while. He smiled as he turned back as Naruto excitedly chatted how he would have to create a whole new seal array. The next 2.5 weeks flew by faster than they would have thought. Reunited, Team 7 tackled back-after-back C-rank missions in order to fulfill their necessary quota. They tackled more bandits, protected caravans, apprehended a wanted fugitive, and even retrieved an ostrich. Finally, after all of their hard work, they stood in front of the designated building for the first trial of the Chunin exams. Anyone else got a weird mix of nervous and excited? Naruto asked, to which the others nodded as they stared at the door. Kakashi had prepped them one final time the previous day, but did not wish them good luck. They didn't need it. Though they were anxious, the prospect of truly testing themselves thrilled them to no end. Each of them had worked incredibly hard to reach this point, and this was where it all was going to pay off. As a unit, they entered the building. After ignoring the two Chunin trying to dissuade other examinees, they entered the exam room and felt a little anxious as more than half of the people in the room turned to stare at them. Naruto stared over the heads of the applicants throughout the room. He didn't know there would be this many people. There were teams from all over. He easily recognized the headbands for the hidden sand, rain, grass, and waterfall villages scattered throughout the room. There was even a new symbol that he didn't recognize in the shape of an eighth note. As his gaze wandered to the back of the room, he was shocked when he recognized an unexpected symbol. "Cloud sent people this year?" Naruto whispered to Sasuke. "I thought Kakashi-sensei said Suna was the only other major hidden village to send representatives. Looks like they decided to send a team or two," Sasuke muttered as he noticed 6 total cloud headbands across the room. He was sizing them up as he was knocked forward. A pair of arms wrapped around his neck, as a voice murmured, "Sasuke-kun. You're late. Didn't anyone ever teach you it's rude to keep a girl waiting? Ino, please get off Sasuke. You're embarrassing everyone present." Shikamaru groaned as he and Chuji walked up to the group. "It's just been a while. It's like you guys just disappeared off the face of the earth," she purred. She either didn't notice Sasuke's disgusted stare or she ignored it, as she turned to Hinata. "Hinata-chan, I never thought you would be so crafty. Sneaking off with Sasuke-kun all for yourself," Ino teased as she winked at her shy friend. "Please don't say things like that," she muttered as she forced herself from twiddling her thumbs. "I think Sasuke-kun would prefer it if you were to let him go, Ino." Ino released her grip on Sasuke and walked up to Hinata. She got face to face with her and seemed to be inspecting her over. There was the ever-expected blush, but Ino noted Hinata was holding herself up better than she had before. "Well, look at you, Hinata-chan. I'm so proud of you. Finally come out of your shell. I was beginning to wonder if you would ever stop getting so embarrassed. There are still some traces, but we can work on those later," she said with a smile as she hugged her friend. Hinata smiled back as she returned the hug. Ino stepped away and seemed glanced her up and down as she circled her. "Still wearing those bulky clothes, I see. We'll get you out of those yet. Maybe into something a little more revealing. Something that shows off the shoulders," Ino teased with a wink. Ino," Hinata pleaded as a new blush formed on her face. There it was. Ino chuckled as she saw more of the Hinata that she used to know. She was happy Hinata had made some major steps forward, but she couldn't help poking the buttons she knew would always work. Ino pig, stop teasing Hinata. I'm sure she doesn't find it as funny as you, a new voice called out. The group turned around to see Team 8 standing in the doorway. Sakura stood in the center, flanked by Kiba and Shino. Kiba held his ever-cocky grin, as he smirked at the group. As usual, Akamaru sat comfortably on his head and yipped his greetings to the other genin. Shino was silent as ever, surveying the group with a cool indifference. Sasuke gave him a nod, which the boy was pleased to return. Sakura stood with her hands on her hips as she shot Ino a reprimanding look. It's okay, Sakura. I know she isn't trying to be mean, Hinata said, trying to dissolve the situation. Well, look at you, forehead girl. Gotta say, love the new outfit. Somehow, even you are making it work. Sakura had embraced her sensei wholeheartedly, and modeled herself after her new influence. Her outfit and her sensei's were almost identical, aside from the red being replaced with a pink shade similar to her hair. I guess I'll take the compliment, coming from you, she replied, before smiling at the rest of the group. It's so nice to see everyone again. I see I'm not the only one who had a wardrobe change, she commented as she gave Naruto a look up and down. Like it? Naruto said as he spun and showed off his navy shirt. I got it as a gift after graduation. They're just so comfy and light. They're not orange, but I guess they're still pretty cool. Looks good on you. Glad to finally see you in something other than orange, Kiba said as he glanced him over. Who were they from? Naruto stopped as he raised a finger to his chin. You know, I never really found out. They just left the package on my door and left. Sasuke noticed Hinata seemed nervous for some reason, as she looked away and twiddled her thumbs. Sakura turned to Sasuke and simply offered him a nod, which greatly surprised him. She had changed more than her outfit, it appeared. It was an appreciated change of pace. My. Nothing but gossip from you rookies. Keep that up, and the other teams are going to start to think you'll be easy pickings, a voice said as a new person approached the group. The genin turned and stared at the new arrival with gray hair and thick glasses. And you are? Kabuto, he replied with a light smile, pleased to meet your acquaintances. What did you mean about easy picking? Kiba asked. Kabuto smirked and pointed behind them. The group turned and realized the classroom of applicants were still staring them down. They had gotten so caught up that they forgot they were standing in front of the entire class. Many of the nearby shinobi, especially a few wearing rain headbands, were shooting the gathered rookies particularly viscous glares. After giving some advice about keeping quiet, Kabuto offered to share some information about himself. You failed 6 times. You must not very good, Kiba scoffed before Sakura smacked him in the head. Kiba! That was rude. I apologize for his comment, Kabuto-san, she said, ignoring Kiba muttering under his breath behind her. It's no problem. My expertise lies mostly in information gathering and medical ninjutsu. I'm not really suited for combat, he chuckled. So you must have considerable knowledge about the exam, correct? Shino asked. The rookies were slightly startled at his voice, since this was the first time he had spoken since they arrived. Kabuto nodded as he whipped out a deck of cards. Indeed I do. I happen to keep these info cards regarding each of the teams participating in the exams. I'd be happy to share them with you. Niji Hyuga and that team from Kyomo, Sasuke said immediately. Hinata flinched at the mention of Niji's name, but Kabuto ignored her as he withdrew the desired cards. Holding up the first one, he said, a year older than you all. Mission history, D rank, 110 completed, C rank, 14 completed. Sensei is Mato Guy. He is incredibly skilled in the Hyuga's Juken form, and is praised as a genius even. This is his first exam with his teammates, Tenten Yukari and Rock Lee. Hinata had felt some discomfort at the mention of Niji's name, but the feeling didn't really linger. The same could not be said as Kabuto pulled out the 3 Kyomonins cards. They are designated as Team Tesla. Mission history, D rank, 78 completed, C rank, 34 completed, and B rank, 6 completed. Sensei is Rokaru Yamada. The team consists of J. Oshiro, Kaimoto, and EHL Honda. Unfortunately, I don't have anything regarding their abilities. They certainly are a surprise, considering Kyomo usually refrains from sending emissaries to the exams. The genin were quiet as they digested this new information. 6 B-rank missions, that was just insane for a genin team. The knowledge that a team like that was part of the competition really made them realize how difficult this was going to be. That's crazy, Naruto muttered as he glanced over the Kumo team. Maybe, Sasuke said as his lip curled, but we've been through worse. Naruto returned the grin as Kiba butted in, oh really? Stop trying to act all cool, Sasuke. I'll admit you guys are good, but there's no way you've gone on anything like that. Care to bet, dog breath? Naruto asked with a wily smile. Absolutely, Kiba grinned back at him. Naruto-kun. I don't think that would be a good idea, Hinata chimed in. Nah, go ahead and ask him, Kiba. Your reaction will be priceless, Sasuke smirked. Fine. Let's see Team 7's cards, Kiba replied smugly as he crossed his arms. Kabuto chuckled as he shifted through the deck. Come now. We're all Konoha genin in this. You all should be working together rather than pushing each other away. The exams are for personal promotion, but they're also about demonstrating the strength of the village. The more Konohanin that pass, the better message that sends to the village's clients. He stopped as he drew out the 3 cards. Here we are, Team 7. Their sensei is Kakashi Hatake. For mission history, we have 22 D ranks accomplished, for C ranks, 7 accomplished, and, well no, 2 A ranks. Team 7 was suddenly the center of attention as they felt the eyes of everyone in the room focus on them. Naruto internally cursed as he shot Sasuke a look. We certainly have a target painted on us now. He angrily whispered, way to go, Sasuke. Just had to show up, Kiba, didn't you? You're one to talk, Hinata quietly scolded, you both are just too competitive. They both felt guilt creep through their system as they offered her a shy smile. As usual, she was right, Kiba sputtered as he tried to regain his bearings. He was about to go off, when the door slammed open behind him. Akamaru yelped and Kiba jumped in surprise at the towering man clad in black before him. He glared down at him and growled, move. The rookies and Kabuto walked off as fast as their feet could carry them and spread out through the classroom. The man's almost hungry gaze instantly began to grate on the nerves of the genin. He was certainly imposing, and the scars along his face certainly helped reinforce that image. Oh no, Naruto muttered as he recognized the man. What? Who is it? Sakura whispered as Naruto slammed his head into the desk. The two had unintentionally ended up sitting next to each other in the 6th row. It's Ibiki. He's the head of the interrogation division. Nei-chan told me about him, he groaned through the wood. Sakura raised an eyebrow and was about to inquire more, when the man started talking. Alright, listen up. I'm Marino Ibiki, the examiner for the Chunin selection exam's first test. Shut up so we can all get started. To say the least, a unanimous groan echoed through the room as he revealed the true nature of the exam. What do you mean it's a written exam? Hinata smiled as she penciled in her final answer. She was quite proud of herself. Sure, she had seen through the true purpose of the test, but she had taken it upon herself to actually tackle the test without resorting to cheating. Even without using her Byakugan, she still managed to answer all 9 questions. She turned over her test and glanced around the room. About a quarter of the examinees had been failed already. Some were just not sly enough in their approach to cheating, or they were disqualified due to their teammates. Speaking of which, she cast a glance to her right towards Sasuke, who sat 2 rows in front of her. While he was quickly writing, she noticed his head wasn't exactly turned towards his paper. She noticed the planted Chunin in the row ahead of him, and noticed their hands. He was using his Sharingan to copy the plant's movements for his answers. Satisfied with his progress, she turned to her left towards Naruto. He and Sakura were about 3 rows ahead of her. He seemed to be making steady progress. While it was commonly known he despised any form of testing, she knew he was actually quite smart. All those years of Fuinjutsu calculations and studying had to count for something. Indeed, Naruto had actually done pretty well, and was quite pleased with his work. He had sailed through the problems regarding calculations, but the ones regarding history or foreign policy stumped him. He glanced over at Sakura, who had sailed through this section of the test no problem. His eyes shot back to his paper, as he felt the heated glare of Ibiki turn on him. He was actually beginning to get nervous. The clock was growing closer and closer to the time limit, and he still needed to get 3 questions. Sakura was his best bet to getting the correct answers, but he couldn't just peek at her paper. They were far too long and complicated to simply copy. He smirked as an idea popped into his head. Pretending to be bored with the exam, he leaned on his hand as he doodled in the bottom corner of the test. After staring at the prankster for a minute or two, Ibiki grew bored of him and turned his attention to some other unlucky soul. Even after he was satisfied Ibiki's attention was no longer on him, he still waited a minute or two just to be sure. Nei-chan had told him all about the man, and he didn't feel like taking any chance. Naruto occasionally glanced at the chunits patrolling the aisles as he shaded in the final markings. It was hard making them as small as he could, but he was pretty sure they would work. He smiled at his paper as B blew away the little bits of eraser, and stared down at the small seal. Traditionally, seals were transcribed with ink. This was due to its liquid state and low viscosity. Since chakra was just another form of energy, it tended to flow easier through a liquid format. Using water was out of the question because it was almost impossible for it to keep the defined shape that was necessary seals to function. However, liquids comprising of water tended to be great conduits for Fuinjutsu. As it turned out, blood was an excellent framework for seals due to its viscosity and tendency to stain. In fact, certain seal patterns were only accessible through the use of blood as a marker. For obvious reasons, it was a practice that was heavily frowned upon and forbidden across the elemental nations. Thus, ink served as the happy medium that fulfilled the necessary requirements. That being said, a liquid was not always required for seals. It was just the easiest medium for spreading chakra through the pattern. Other methods, such as a pencil or even a crayon were possible, but less proficient. Naruto looked at his tiny design, and quietly tore off the bottom of the page. This was where things got tricky. His whole plan actually centered on something out of his control. He gently tapped Sakura's feet as he slid the tiny piece of paper to his right. She was silent as the tiny piece of paper slid next to her test. This was the problem with his plan. He had to rely on blind trust that Sakura would be willing to help him. Honestly, there was no reason for her to do so. If anything, ratting him out would only help her. If he were to be disqualified, her team would have an even better chance at passing. The less competition, the better. However, he hoped that she would remember Kabuto's message from earlier. The exam wasn't just about being promoted. It was about proving the strength of the entire village. The more teams from Konoha that passed, the better it would look. Kitsune and the Hokage had both lectured him for years about placing his trust too easily, but once it was earned, it was hard to shake. He and Sakura had known each other for years. Sure, they were never the closest of friends, if you could even call them that, but they had grown up alongside each other and shared a bond that resonated throughout their year of rookies. Something instinctual just drove them to feel connected. She stayed silent as she tentatively picked up the piece of paper, and hid it in her palm. Naruto was beginning to feel hopeful, before his tongue curled in his mouth. He fought tooth and nail from crying out due to the crushing pain on his toes. She sent him a short glare as she twisted her heel a little more into his foot. Sakura was an avid by-the-books person, and frowned upon all forms of cheating, even if it was necessary. However, she eventually sighed and removed the pressure from his foot. She placed the tiny scrap of paper on her test, and made a hand seal under the table. The paper flashed for half a second before returning to normal. She tapped his foot twice in return and slid the paper back to him. He didn't glance at her, but he doodled a tiny smiley face on the top of his test for her to see. He placed the shred of paper over the first unsolved question and placed his thumb over the symbol. After a surge of chakra, Sakura's neat handwriting etched across the page. He repeated the process 2 more times, and he smiled at his completed exam. He would have to make it up to her somehow in the next section of the exams. With his test complete, he leaned back as he waited for Ibiki to reveal the final question. After 15 more minutes, Ibiki ordered everyone to drop their pencils, and revealed the final stakes of the final question. Naruto sat up as team after team started to head out the door. His heart burnt as he witnessed more and more genin regretfully drop out of the exam. He glanced across at Sasuke, whom he was relieved to see had no intention to forfeit this opportunity. He could tell without even looking that Hinata was a different story. It wasn't concern for herself that plagued her, but rather her concern for her teammates. She knew how much being a shinobi meant to them, and she did not want to ruin their chances just for a single question. Naruto could start to see her hand twitch, and his eyes widened. He was not going to allow her to ruin her chance to prove her family wrong just for their sake. He slammed his hand on the desk and stared Ibiki directly in the eyes. "Something you want to say, Pipsqueak?" Ibiki coldly asked as he and the boy stared down each other. Neither flinched or even blinked in their grudge match of will. "Yeah, actually I do. I think you're full of bullshit." Silence fell upon the room, as the atmosphere was flattened by his response. Excuse me, you heard me the first time. I call bull. I will not run away from this. So what if I remain a genin forever? It's just a title, and titles mean nothing in the real world. Your rank does not measure your skill. It's my dream to become Hokage, and I don't care if I have to be considered a genin for the rest of my life before that happens. He finished his tirade and shot Ibiki one last look. I won't run away from your empty threats. His words echoed throughout the room, resonating with every applicant. They started to smile as they turned their attention back to the proctor. They were ready to keep going, despite the odds. Now isn't he something else? Ibiki thought as he watched the blonde brat sit back down. He certainly has a way of inspiring people, even those from other villages. After a minute without anyone else dropping, he decided to call it. The kid had roused the other genin, and no one else would be backing out now. He smirked as he gazed at the troublesome genin in question. Naruto Uzumaki. I am very interested to see how far you get. Sasuke gulped at the sight of the scars, as Ibiki tied up the back of his bandana. Those of you who decided to take the chance answered the 10th question correctly. You have proven you have the guts to face down an inevitable situation and face it head-on. Congratulations, you have made it through the entrance. The first test of the Chunin selection exam is now finished. I wish you guys luck. There was a shatter of glass as a dark blur suddenly appeared in front of him. The new arrival smirked and struck a pose, as her backdrop fell from the ceiling. All right you maggots, listen up. Don't get too cocky. This is no time to be celebrating. Naruto groaned and cradled his face in his hands. It just had to be her, didn't it? The examinees were stunned at the woman's sudden entrance, and even more surprised by the more than self-flattering message across the canvas. A little too early, Anko, Ibiki muttered as he walked around the banner. She ignored him as she quietly counted the heads of the remaining teams. 66. You let 22 teams pass. She exclaimed as she rounded on Ibiki. You're losing your edge, old-timer. You went way too soft on them. Keep this up, and I'll be snatching your job right from under you. No chance in hell, Mitarashi. As for the genin, what can I say? There's some real talent out there this year, he chuckled. Oh, I already know, she replied with a sadistic smile as she scanned the room. Her eyes wandered over everyone's faces as she searched for one person in particular. Where are you hiding, you brat? Finally, she halted at the clump of blonde hair attempting to hide behind the desk, and called out, There you are, you little punk. Naruto froze as he slowly peeked over the desk and sent the woman a nervous smile. Hey Ankone-chan. A long time, no see. And whose fault is that? She asked far too sweetly as she suddenly appeared right next to his seat. He yelped and fell back over his chair. He ignored the stinging pain and stares of everyone in the room, as he waved his arms in front of him. Why, you know it wasn't intentional, Nei-chan. Kakashi-sensei and Gigi were just keeping us really busy. I would have swung by if I had the time, I swear. Ah, you were just too busy. That sounds just awful, she dragged out as she placed her boot onto his chest. Poor little Naru-chan. You should have just said so. Of course I believe you. I mean, it's not like you would use any free time you possibly could have had reading through books, instead of checking in with me. You know that would just break my precious, little heart. Beads of sweat raced down his face and he gulped. The woman threw her head back and let out a sadist laugh, before smirking and spinning a kunai through the handle. Relax, brat. Smile a little, she said as she removed her heel and took a step back. I've actually missed you, runt. No one else works quite as well as a target dummy as you do. To accent her point, she flicked the kunai past his face as he started to get to his feet. The sharp metal had stung, but it didn't really bother him. Honestly, it was really nice to see her too. She was right. It really had been too long, and he felt guilty as hell for not checking in with her sooner. The other examinees watched on in confusion at the antics of the strange duo. Naruto-kun, Hinata called from the other side of the room, who is this lady? She was surprised by the little girl's question, and angrily bopped Naruto on top of head. You mean you haven't told your teammates about me? Now that actually is hurtful, Naru-chan. If you hadn't picked up your manners from me, I would have socked you again. Naruto grumbled in response, while rubbing his aching head. The woman flashed Hinata a devious smile as she placed a hand on her hip. The name is Anko Mitarashi, Hyuga girl. Don't you forget it. That goes for all of you. I am your proctor for the next phase of the exam. I hope you're ready, cause it is going to be an absolute bloodbath. That's it for part 7. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.